Well, good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Hope everyone's having a lovely day and that you had a marvelous evening last night as well. We've got some incredible news to go over today. Big moves in the censorship world. We've got both Josh Hawley and President Donald Trump speaking out and going directly after the source of censorship of conservative voices. You are not going to want to miss it. Now, in particular, one of those subjects that President Trump is being censored on is the voter fraud issue itself. It has been widely derided by the left and the Dems. However, there is a mail carrier in West Virginia who was just busted in a voter fraud incident. We've also got new information coming out in regards to the Italian job section of Spygate. Apparently, Renegade held a state dinner just 3 days prior to the Carter Page FISA warrant fiasco kicking off. And finally, in keeping with our theme of draining the swamp, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien has cut the NSC staff to half of Renegade-era levels. You're not going to want to miss it. So please, everyone, do sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. I don't know about everyone, but during this lockdown, many people have started doing a lot of things differently. Their old lives, like a daily commute to the office, just aren't happening. Some of you, I'm sure, don't miss the drive that much. Talking to a lot of people on Zoom, of course, they feel the same way about many things, and they've been recommending apps and favorite TV shows or YouTube channels and other ways of making life better, or at least tolerable. And not just for now, but on an ongoing basis. If you've seen the returns on the stock market since the beginning of the year, since the virus hit, it's very clear that the old ways aren't working too well anymore. The Fed is having to prop up returns. It's pumped trillions of dollars into a system to try to avoid what looks like an inevitable collapse. You can't have 20% unemployment. That's over 26 million jobs. 26 million without massive fallout. You can't spend trillions bailing out businesses with no consequences. Something has to give, and it will. So we have a secure way to guard our wealth, our savings, and our investments. Gold, silver, palladium, and platinum have proven to be safe haven investments. It's the only investment with appreciating value during an economic collapse. If you're interested in securing your wealth, call Noble Gold Investment today at 877-646-5347. That's 877-646-5347, or visit our website, noblegoldinvestments.com. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. First of all, today we have a tweet from J.D. Durkin. That would be at JiveDurkey on Twitter. Now, what he's given us is a letter from Josh Hawley of Missouri. Now, in this letter, he's demanding that the CEO of the company that owns this platform provide information about the censorship of comments on this platform, which are critical of the CCP. Now, people have been writing certain comments about the CCP, and they've been automatically deleted or they have been censored. Now, he says that they are selling out American principles to curry favor with communist officials, and it's no way to run an American business. Let's take a look at the letter. Now, he opens by saying, I write to ask you to respond to troubling reports that your company has resumed its long pattern of censorship at the behest of the CCP. These reports suggest that Google engineers may have changed the algorithms on YouTube to automatically censor certain criticisms of the CCP. In particular, engineers appear to have altered YouTube code to automatically block Chinese terms for Communist Bandit and 50-Cent Party, the latter term referring to a division of the Chinese CCP whose purpose is deflecting criticism from the party by using sock puppet accounts to spread online propaganda. This is a really troubling move on behalf of this platform, and they have come out and said that it was an accident. But the thing about it is, Josh is right. They would have had to have gone in there and actually changed the code themselves. This is not the kind of thing that the computer system or an AI is going to just flag because it thinks there's something wrong with it. This was an intentional move that was done to placate the CCP. It's also in regard to the troubles that are taking place in Hong Kong right now. Some really troubling totalitarian moves are being taken against the people of Hong Kong, and their freedoms are not long for this world. So basically, he gives a list of deliverables that he wants, including identifying any discussions that Sundar Pichai or any other Google executives had in regards to this subject. Some reports suggest that the censorship problem arose first last fall. He wants him to identify exactly when it began, and it continues with about 8 different deliverables he's looking for from Sundar. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the full text of this letter in the pinned comment below with the other articles. So if you guys want to look at it in depth, I encourage you to do so, because as an American company, it is extremely troubling that this platform would work to placate the CCP, which is arguably a foreign adversary. Now, this issue is going to become even more relevant in the days to come, I predict, because last night with Post 4327, we received this article from the Washington Times. It's in regard to some Australian researchers who, in their investigation of the global sickness we find ourselves in the midst of right now, have found evidence that there is design and manipulation present. Now, this is not the first time this has been reported. Initially, in the wake of it first hitting the national scene, there was another group of researchers that found the exact same thing, but that was quickly washed away from the internet. And it has since then become dangerous to even suggest that perhaps that's a possibility. But here, again, we have more information pointing towards it. Now, as this is something that is not favorable to the CCP, and because perhaps it goes against things that other people have said, I would say global health organizations that have a stake in the nature and definition of what we find ourselves in the midst of. This is something that is not easy to discuss on this platform. But the drop continues in the next one, 4328, with a tweet from Nancy Pelosi. And we're asked, was this ever about the health and well-being of people? Was this ever about the virus? Or was it always about the election? Let's take a look at Nancy Pelosi's tweet. Now, here we have a video message from Nancy Pelosi. It's a clip from an interview she did on MSNBC, and she says, voting at home shouldn't be a question of politics. It's a health issue. No American should have to choose between protecting their health and exercising the right to vote. Hashtag inners. What does that mean? Hashtag inners. Well, this clip is about the Vote at Home initiative that the Democrats are trying to put into place. President Trump has been out speaking about this, and he has called the alarm bell on how dangerous this is in terms of what can be done to fake these votes. The Democrats and people on Twitter have attacked him mercilessly, calling this a dangerous theory, something that has no basis in fact, when evidently it actually does have quite a bit of basis in fact. Now, President Trump has gotten quite a bit of heat because of this, and now Twitter has taken a new move. Let's take a look at some tweets from the president. Now, in continuing the idea of censorship, President Trump earlier this morning said Republicans feel that social media platforms totally silence conservative voices. We will strongly regulate or close them down before we can ever allow this to happen. We saw what they attempted to do and failed in 2016. We can't let a more sophisticated version of that happen again. Just like we can't let large-scale mail-in ballots take root in our country. It would be a free-for-all on cheating, forgery, and theft of ballots. Whoever cheated the most would win. Likewise, social media. Clean up your act now. Well, evidently Twitter did not like the message that President Trump put forward in these tweets. And I find it very interesting that first we have the censorship in relation to the CCP. We get the post letting us know exactly what's the nature of the virus. And then we get this post right here from President Trump. Well, let's take a look at the action Twitter has taken in response. So after President Trump has sounded the alarm on censorship of conservative voices and on the issue of faking ballots through the mail-in voting process, Twitter has now falsely undermined the truth, thereby misleading the American people. Earlier yesterday morning, Twitter added a fact check to President Trump's tweets on the mail-in voting scandals. And conservative Michael Kodry caught this earlier today on a Trump tweet on mail-in voter fraud. Now, let's take a closer look at Michael Kodry's tweet. He says, wow, look at what Twitter is doing to the President of the United States tweets. They are attaching a link, then saying, according to CNN and the Washington Post, arguably two of the loudest voices in the fake stream media, what he is saying is unsubstantiated. This is insane. Now, President Trump initially put this tweet out, there is no way, zero, that mail-in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed out and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people, anyone. Now, if you look at the bottom here, it says, get the facts about mail-in ballots. And if you click that link, then it takes you to this slide right here, which includes the coverage from Washington Post and CNN, how Trump is making unsubstantiated claim that mail-in ballots will lead to voter fraud. Well, there's a reason President Trump is putting out that message. Here is another look at how this tweet will look in incognito mode. You can clearly see here how Twitter has added the link, giving people the option to get the facts about mail-in ballots. Twitter is running fact checks on the president's tweets in support of mail-in voting. Was this ever really about anything but the election? I don't think so. The person behind the Twitter site integrity just happens to be an avowed leftist who says that there are the bad guys from WW2 in the White House. And on Wednesday, Jenna Ellis, the senior legal advisor to Team Trump and attorney to President Trump, issued a response to the partisan tactics Twitter has taken as of earlier today. Now, she starts out, Team Trump rejects Twitter's blatantly partisan attempt to fact-check the president on election integrity. Twitter has falsely undermined the truth and opinion of his tweet, thereby misleading the American public on the valid concerns with mail-in ballots. Now, here is the fact about this stuff. Mail-in balloting increases the chain of custody of a ballot and thus increases the incidence of fraud. Without mail-in balloting, there can't be vote harvesting, which is a key attempt of Democrats to undermine important safeguards to election security. Without mail-in balloting, there is zero chance of ballots being stolen or not cast on time. Election integrity and security is not a partisan issue, and President Trump is right to be concerned with keeping the votes of all Americans in all elections free and fair. And then they call on Twitter to remove this partisan fact-check flag, an obvious political maneuver suggesting that President Trump's tweet was false. Now, when you look at the history of mail-in voting and the things that have been done in recent elections, I immediately turn my mind to the Arizona election where the sudden increase of ballots in the favor of Kristen Sinema allowed her to win. And then, of course, many stories of ballot harvesting in California. Judicial Watch has found hundreds of thousands of incidents of people who are deceased casting ballots or having ballots sent out to them. I get reports on a daily basis of people who watch the show getting ballots for people that don't live at their addresses or people who are deceased. The opportunity to cheat is just too great when it comes to mail-in ballots. And the reason that Twitter is attacking this is because the president is right. Now, the media, the social media companies, they are clearly an arm of the DNC, and they were working overtime to attempt to get President Trump out of office. The more they can cheat, the more likely their chances are of getting what they want. Well, President Trump has actively responded to Twitter and their moves to fact-check him. At 10:22 today, he said Twitter has now shown that everything we've been saying about them and their compatriots is correct. Big action to follow. I just want to remind everyone that the DOJ is actively seeking antitrust investigations into the social media companies right now, and I think that it is not a coincidence that the president has now put the issues front and center. He has allowed them to fact-check him, and now he's calling them out in a very direct manner. After several years of censorship of voices like mine and yours, now they are finally, truly doing it to the president. As we've been told by our favorite Anand, sometimes you can't just tell people, you have to show them. And now with Twitter showing the world that they are willing to obscure the truth just because the president is the one saying it, you can bet this is going to cause some major moves. I am certainly looking forward to seeing what happens. Now that the president is feeling it exactly the same way as us, there is no reason for him not to take action. Now let's take a look at another post. Now, before we read post 4330, I just want to remind everyone why it was necessary to go about showing the American public in this manner. If President Trump would have walked into office and just made a bunch of dictatorial decisions, telling companies what to do, telling people how to act, forcing his views on people, the public would have revolted. Not us, perhaps, but everyone else that we needed to convince. It was necessary to show everyone the true nature of those that we are working against. Now, here in Post 4330, your voice and your vote are what matters most. Witnessing attempts to remove both. We are seeing both happen at the exact same time. 1. Censorship, fascism, and authoritarianism. 2. Deplatform, removal, silence. And 3. Mail-in voter fraud, which dilutes the voting pool. Water down constitutional rights, freedom of speech, willfully blind, or willfully accepting. The fact is that many people in America are not only willfully blind, but also willfully accepting of whatever it is their dim overlords tell them to do. They take the fake news, they consume it, and then they regurgitate the same talking points. They are unable to understand how President Trump and the actions he's taking and the actions that we as patriots are taking are not only in our best interest, but they are in the best interest of all people. Freedom and justice must return here in America, and in order to get this done, we had to show the American public. Twitter has put their hypocrisy on display, and President Trump will now take action. Now, while the fake news and the social media companies are interested in shutting down the truth that President Trump is attempting to tell us, once again, he's actually proven right with the information he's put out in his tweets. There was a mail carrier in West Virginia who's been charged in a voter fraud case in connection with the manipulation of absentee ballot requests. Now, keep in mind, this is just a week after a judge in Pennsylvania was found guilty of ballot stuffing himself. Now, these charges were announced in West Virginia by the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey and U.S. Attorney Bill Powell and Secretary of State Mac Warner. These are charges against a rural mail carrier, and it's worth mentioning that the announcement from West Virginia law enforcement came the exact same day that President Trump put out his tweets, and Twitter chose to add these fact-checking links, which substantially undercut the message of President Trump's Twitter feed. No coincidence there, nothing to see. It is just the social media companies doing their best to try to keep the American public informed, as if. Now, President Trump has stated that the CV-19 is an opportunity for the Dems to use this crisis to attempt to rig the election through mail-in voting, which is what we've been saying all along. So President Trump puts out the tweet, Twitter adds the fact check, and then the announcement that someone in West Virginia is doing the exact same thing President Trump is trying to call attention to is completely ignored. Now, within hours of President Trump's tweet, it was reported that Cooper, the mail carrier from West Virginia, 47, of Dry Fork, was charged with attempting to defraud the residents of West Virginia of a fair election. Now, according to the Attorney General, Cooper altered 8 absentee ballot requests in Pendleton County by changing the party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. Now, the Secretary of State Warner said, "We want everyone to be tuned into the increased opportunities for fraud. Voting absentee makes it easy to vote, but increases opportunities for irregularities and fraud to occur. If you see something, say something." Now, the question is, how many other mail carriers throughout the United States are doing the exact same thing? This is the situation where, although the votes were being faked in favor of Republicans, we know that it happens for Democrats as well. I am not concerned about who they are trying to fake the votes for. I am concerned they are trying to fake the votes at all. By changing absentee ballots, by stuffing ballot boxes, by depriving the citizens of this country of a free and fair election, a very few people are deciding who it will be that rules our country. Whether it's at the local, state, or national level, it does not matter. We cannot allow this type of election rigging to take place regardless of political party. Now, in the next post, Post 4331, we have a link to a Zero Hedge article about keyboard warriors, people like you and I, my friends. And we're told intelligence was manipulated by who? Brennan. Watch the news. That means this is going to be coming up again very soon. But let's take a look at the article from Zero Hedge. Now, it's entitled Trump's Keyboard Warriors Get the Story While the Legacy Media Ignores #Obamagate. Now, what this does is lay out the fraud that we've been living under for the last several years. And it starts out by pointing out the fact that CrowdStrike admitted under oath that there was never a hack by the Russians, and that essentially they have no proof that the Russians had anything to do with the leak that took place. Now, remember, we've known since the beginning that there was a phishing expedition that was done by someone to get JP, Hillary Clinton's campaign advisor, John Podesta, to divulge his password, which was apparently password in capital letters, so that they could get all of the information inside his mailbox. That included opposition research against President Trump and many other things. But this article does an excellent job of laying out the fraud that was perpetrated upon us and how they worked very hard to make it look like the Russians had something to do with it. We've looked at this from 6 ways till Sunday, but it's a long article, so I'm going to let you guys take a look at it. And we're going to take a look at a new bit of information in regards to the Spygate scandal. And the word is that just days before the Carter Page FISA warrant kicked off, Renegade held an official state dinner with Italy. Now, after all that we've learned about Italy throughout the last couple of years, and much in the very recent weeks and months, it's become pretty obvious that Italy is probably where this entire Trump-Russia collusion sham was kicked off. We have this dinner that's now being revealed. We've had George Papadopoulos talking about the spying that was done on both him and on General Flynn. The fact that Mifsud was involved with Italy. We found out that he was most likely hiding out there throughout this entire investigation. We know that Obama had a very close relationship with Matteo Renzi, the former leader of the Italian people. And we also know that George Papadopoulos mentioned in his tweets the evidence that came out after he was spied on in Rome and London, and that most likely we're going to hear some new information coming out about the evidence against the clowns in America. You must not forget about Italian nuclear engineer Giulio Occhianero, who pointed out the Italian connection in the release of those who unmasked General Michael Flynn. Remember, there were people from the Italian embassy that were listed on there. It was Obama's Italian ambassador to Italy, John Phillips, and the deputy chief of mission in Italy, Kelly Degnan. Now, don't forget, Occhianero was arrested for a crime he didn't commit. He was set up by the deep state. They attempted to put the stolen HRC emails onto his server, which was located in the United States, even though he was an Italian living in Italy. And when they arrested him, they asked him, who is your contact with the Trump team? Now, the Italian press is absolutely appalled with reports that young Papadopoulos' wife, an Italian model, was asked by the FBI to spy on her husband. Yet another troubling connection between Italy and those who seek to dethrone President Trump. Now, she was also targeted after she testified in front of Congress that Joseph Mifsud, who has those Italian connections, is actually a member of the Clinton Foundation. Now, don't forget, the most damaging document was the recently released Crossfire Hurricane launch letter, the document that started it all. And it ended up culminating in the Mueller special counsel, but it all started with this very document. Now, in that Crossfire Hurricane document, it's referring to Italy. Now, there is strong evidence to suggest that in that document referring to Italy, the individual that is being referred to is the Legat, or the legal attaché Kieran Ramsey. Kieran Ramsey would not testify in the trial against Giulio Occhianero, most likely because they were attempting to hide something. Now, Ramsey is also wanted for questioning to be interviewed by the Senate. Now, take a look here. This is the actual electronic communication which started the whole thing off, and Peter Strzok refers to Deputy Chief of Mission, but the country is redacted. Now, it is very likely that the Deputy Chief of Mission that is being referred to is the same Deputy Chief of Mission that was listed in the people who actually did the unmasking of General Flynn. Now, we also had a change of guard at the Holy See, which is the Vatican, and then we have the dinner just 3 days before the Carter Page FISA warrant kicks off. This was more than likely a deep state get-together where they patted each other on the backs, they congratulated themselves, and perhaps they looked up to shore any holes in their story and work on crimes that were going to be committed in the future. Now, at that dinner, guess who else was present? Well, Hunter Biden was there. Also, Italy's Raffaele Cantone, which Renzi had appointed as president of the Anti-Corruption National Authority in Italy. There is no wonder now, when you look at all of these facts simultaneously, why Attorney General Bill Barr and U.S. Attorney John Durham took a double-troubled trip to Italy to investigate and to question the leaders of the Italian intelligence community. Keep your eyes on this one. It's about to blow wide open. And finally, I just wanted to celebrate with you guys, showing there is more swamp draining taking place. Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, continues to drain the swamp. He has cut the staff at the NSC to half of the Obama-era levels. Now, the national security purge began back in February when President Trump fired the Vindman twins from their national security position at the White House. Now, the president has also cut 70 Obama holdovers from the national security at that time. But Trump's goal is to cut the agency in half. And on Tuesday, the New York Post reported that President Trump's national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, has dramatically cut down the size of the National Security Council even more. The job cuts are an attempt to streamline the foreign policy outfit, which ballooned under the Barry administration to almost 240 staffers. That's up from 115 during Condoleezza Rice's tenure as George W. Bush's NSA in the early 2000s. Now, by the end of the summer, the NSC will consist of just 105 staff. Under previous administrations, the NSC more than doubled in size and duplicated many of the functions of the DoD, state, and intelligence community. Under President Trump, we have brought the NSC back to its proper size and role as the coordinating body. Now, with John Brennan bloating the size of the National Security Council, using it as sort of a base of operations to run intelligence about people that they wanted to keep an eye on, it is clear that the National Security Council played a major role in the attempt to remove President Trump. All you need to do is look at the people who have testified against him in these ridiculous investigations put on by the Dems. Many of the individuals testifying against the president in the Ukraine Gate scandal were members of the National Security Council, and the Vindman brothers were at the heart of the whole thing. Now, with the removal of all of these very dangerous people that were holdovers from the last administration, the National Security Council has been reduced, and thereby so has the size of the swamp. Well, guys, with today's episode, I hoped to show you that several of the complaints that people who feel President Trump is not doing a good enough job on are baseless in their merit. We've got the censorship of conservative voices. That has now begun to be addressed. We've got the ballot issue, which is now sure to be addressed. And we have the issue of the swamp being drained, which, to be honest, has been happening the entire time. But the problem is these people don't see it enough of it, and they believe that just because they don't know about it, it isn't taking place. Well, I'm hoping that with this broadcast, you can show these people that yes, in fact, the things we are concerned about are actually being addressed. The truth of the matter is, it just needed to be done in an organized, military fashion. President Trump knows exactly what he's doing, and the people who are working behind the scenes have the plan well in hand. So yes, my friends, I trust the plan, and I choose to put my faith in not only God, but in the job that President Trump is going to be doing to restore our republic and give us our country back. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, one more thing. It's Red Pill. I just want to say thank you once again to everybody that has helped to support the channel. If you'd like to get involved, you can go ahead and check the show notes in the pinned comment and the description. There's always good information in there. I've got a couple of backup channels. I ask that you go ahead and subscribe to them, because if anything does happen here, I will start publishing there. And if you want things like merchandise or anything else, there is a bunch of information that you can find right below this video. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.